But I wanted to take a moment and just tell you that as I was getting ready this morning, I was thinking about coffee. Last week I shared the story about coffee, and the story was about, what happens if someone comes up and accidentally drops sugar in your coffee or drops strychnine in your coffee. And, the goal was not about who dropped what in your coffee, but the fact of the matter is that we need to watch our cup. And that's where I began this last week. So this week I want to talk about coffee in a little bit different realm. I've been thinking again quite a bit about this. I don't know about you, but I've been in places where I've had a cup of coffee and someone bumps into me. And so, what happens when someone bumps into you when you have a cup of coffee? Coffee comes out. And that may sound like a goofy thing to say, but the fact of the matter is, what happens when someone bumps into you? Not about coffee. What comes out of you? What happens when trials come towards you? What happens when challenges come towards you? What do you do with those things? How do you respond? So, how we respond will have a lot to do with what is in us. Yesterday, Jacob and I, we were talking about the title of this morning's message about any dead fish can swim downstream, and he said to me, "Well, what really happens is they float downstream." And the fact of the matter is, yes, they do, because people will go where they go if they don't live with intention, if they don't live intentionally. And so this morning, um, again, I just want to welcome you. My name's Lee with Abundant Grace Fellowship here in Keene. And this morning I'm going to start where I left off. And where I left off last week, I had finished on what do you do with the things that come to you? I was sharing again with my grandson this week some of my affirmations about good things coming to me, about being able to see, closing my eyes and be able to see this river of goodness flowing towards me. Because all good things flow towards me, but all good things are within me if I allow those things to come out. And I talked about the river of God last week in the book of Genesis, where it comes out, the river of God flows from God, and it forms these four fountainheads. And I shared the scripture that those streams moved into rivers, and that river contained the grain. And I talked about the scripture about casting your bread upon the waters, that it would come back to you. And oftentimes, we talk about those things related to giving. Could be giving of our talent, giving of our treasure, giving of our time. The hardest thing to give, I think, is to give of our time, because we have to make space for it. Living intentionally forces us to make space for that. And so when Jacob and I were talking about, the living intentionally and about visualizing, seeing good things come to you in the morning, I've been taking this class for about a month. And what I realized is, while I'm highly disciplined about a lot of things, it was very easy for me just to turn over, pick up my phone, not read messages. And that's not how I began my day. Look at affirmations, but I would see notifications. It would say notification from Joe, or notification about, you know, cryptocurrency, or notification about the president. And those things would begin to take away from the force that I needed to create in my own life. Intentional living means that we have to live with intention. That may sound very simple to understand, but what happens is it's easy to get caught up in going on autopilot. Just the other day, I may have shared this before, but I was driving down the road and I ended up someplace I didn't expect to be in because I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. My normal routine was to drive and go to a certain place, get there. And so I got there, and only to find out that's not where I wanted to go, because I've been meditating upon some things and I was on autopilot. And so one of the questions I've been forced to ask myself, and I encourage others to look at as part of living with intention, is what is our autopilot? What is our default? What do we drop back to? When things go bad, do we drop back to, oh, I'm an idiot, oh, I'm stupid, no one's ever going to like me, that kind of thing? Or do we recognize that there's something that has come out of those affirmations, those words of life that we speak over our lives? Have we done anything with those? For me, I still at 66 still have some defaults. Part of it is I went through a period of my life where I didn't have people speaking into me. If I had one thing that I could live over, so to speak, I would go back to the days between the time I was probably 16 to 30, that 14-year span, and I would listen to people. Because when I became 16, I got involved in some things that weren't healthy. You know, crazy things happened at school. Had my own license, had my own car. Didn't even have my license a month when I had my first slew of tickets. I mean, don't speed, stop at stop signs. All those things. But like a child, you begin to think that you can live magically. Like a child, you begin to think that you're above those things. And so, if I could get back a portion of my life, it would be that portion. It would be that portion where well meaning people were speaking into my life, but I wasn't in reception mode. I think if I was a child, if I was a young person, my greatest encouragement to a young person, and just yesterday, Jacob and I were going through some things about how do you deal with normal worry? How do you deal with anxiety? What is the biggest thing? Jacob's big thing is school, and not just all parts of school, but test taking. For some people, tests are easy, and for some people, even if you know the material, tests create anxiety. How do you deal with that? I watched a video on that, and it caused me to see some things in my own self, not the childlike piece, but just some things that I could do better in helping Jacob and other young people walk through things. And so as I look to see how do I help a generation, I need to live with intentionality. Intentionality is the difference from being on autopilot. It's really easy to be on autopilot for me. I used to drive tractor trailer across country, and at nighttime I would just be hooked into the mode, and I would just be going to where I was going. And when I worked jobs that were really, I'm going to use the word boring, I would have to go somewhere in my head to avoid the boring part. But what it didn't help me with was taking care of some of the things I needed to take care of. So this morning, I want us to see if I'm bumped, if someone comes up and tells me something that's converse to what I believe or what I currently believe about something, what is my response to them? Is it I can't be around those people? A friend of mine made a post this morning. It said, cheers to all the people who are willing to look at the truth about something that they didn't believe and be willing to change their mind. It's not about compromise in the sense that, oh, you have a compromised life. It's about the willingness to accept these things so you can begin to live with intentionality in those areas. Parents, grandparents, how do you become a better parent? How do you become a better grandparent? How do you become a better spouse? Are you living with intentionality towards those things? So I want to talk about living with intensity. Years ago I was in a meeting, and the guy came up to me and he prophesied over me a number of times in that meeting. He came up to me and he grabbed my arms and he threw them up in the air. He goes, you might as well stand up. You're called to be radical, and you got to turn it up. And so I've thought about, what does it mean to turn it up in my life? At 66, so many of my peers believe this is a period of their life that they need to just put on the brakes, begin to slow down, cruise into whatever they believe. For me, recently I started a business with a friend of mine, and each day I find myself becoming more and more excited about that job. Not about that job, but about that business, because I see how it can help people. And so how do we turn these things up? How do we become a little stronger? How do I become a little wiser? Am I willing to listen to what the Lord says? Am I willing to hear what others say? Am I willing to believe that I am more than an overcomer through Christ Jesus who strengthens me? How do I step up my vitality in my life? Am I willing to go out and do more exercise than I have been doing? Am I willing to eat better than I have been doing? Am I willing to do those things and get there? How do I develop more heart and more soul about what I want to do? And my clear and concise answer, well, probably not so concise, is but I have to look inside and I have to be willing to see who dwells within me. And I need to trust upon him. You know, a lot of people go through difficult times in their life, and that's when they go, you know what, all I can do is trust in God, or now's the time to pray. No, no, the time to pray, the time to trust is right now, right in this moment. What do you believe in God for? You know, earlier this week, my youngest brother had to have surgery for cancer a week ago. Another friend of mine had cancer for surgery. I took my middle brother, my middle-sized brother. I feel like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, oh, what's in the middle? Well, that would be my middle-sized brother. And you know, I took him to the hospital, and it was supposed to be what's the word? It was supposed to be a normal thing. Well, it didn't end up being normal, and I ended up spending a lot more time at the hospital than I wanted to. But I look at these things and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, when I'm at rest, when I'm in my bed, my mind is rolling. You know, I was saying to Jacob, you know, it takes a real lot to get your mind to stay in the now, because it takes more to think about nothing than it takes to think about something. So if you're going to think about nothing, you're going to have to work really hard. But if you're going to think about something, you want to think of something that brings life to you, that brings living to you. You know, when, you know, I mentioned that time period in my life that if I could get it all back, you know, it was a horrendous time in my life. I had a terrible accident. I was nearly killed. I walked away, you know, from a fiery accident, you know, and I look back at that and I'm like, you know, wow, I'm so lucky. I didn't feel lucky at the time. You know, I suffered a bunch of things and went through, you know, this time frame. And I look back at that and I say, what could I have learned? There was so many things I could learn. It's not about the specific learning. It's about the willingness to live my life with intensity. When I played sports, or, you know, for you, maybe it's about painting a picture or writing a piece of music. Are you giving it your all? Are you living intensely? Are you living in that moment and, you know, allowing these things to come up? You know, like when someone comes up to me, my rebound, you know, back to the cup of coffee being spilled, my rebound to things that are not going well is to take a step back, take a deep breath and say, okay, what am I going to do here and how I'm going to handle this? So today, let's begin to consider what it means to live with intensity. Right now, we are in I'm just going to use the word, a crazy time. You know, one of the things that my partner and I, my friend and I are working on is helping people, um, finding the people they need to serve in the positions they need. And, you know, everybody needs to find their place. Any dead fish, I'll use Jacob's words, any dead fish can float downstream and it's going to end up where it ends up. But only the willingness to go against the flow and go against the stream, like you know, the whole topic of this conversation comes from salmon swimming upstream. You know, they come out of the ocean, they come up to spawn. You know, the Connecticut River used to be filled with salmon, just using a river that's close to us. They were so plentiful. They plugged the riverways. Sometimes the farmers would go out with pitchforks and just grab these salmon and throw them on their fields. They'd use them for fertilizer. These fish, these swimming salmon, they had intentionality. They were pursuing this biological thing that was ingrained in them. You know, they had to go and they had to get to where they were and they had to spawn, and upon going through that whole process, then they were just left to die. You know, finding our place, you know, jobs. How do we find that place, that job? For years, I would hear people say, find that passion, follow your passion, pursue the job that, you know, you're called to be, live like all those things. And here's what I realized. What I realized was I needed to have that passion no matter what I was doing, whether it was digging a well for a neighbor, whether it was digging a ditch, whether it was polishing a car, whether it was washing dishes. I needed to call upon that place in my life to have the same passion for washing the dishes as I did for other things. And so finding our place, though, where we are, so often in the kingdom, people are planted. I'm using the word planted. They're in the soil of God, and they want to be somewhere else. They want to be this nomadic thought process. Go through this nomadic thought process, pick up their tent, move, go on, next, next, next. But the fact of the matter is, we're called to bloom where we're planted. And and the process of leaving where we're planted, that should be a sovereign thing, if you will. That should be the handwriting is on the wall. God is in the middle of all that stuff. But there are better places. Just this morning, I made a post, and it said, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, but sometimes you need to go outside to get wet. And using that scripture, the goodness of God is available to all of us. The question is, what will we do with the goodness of God? As I shared, to Jacob, and shared, just about visualizing goodness, about seeing finances come into my life, about seeing time come into my life, about seeing treasure, or talent coming into my life, and utilizing those things and stepping up my game. 1 Peter 2:9 says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." We've been called out of that dark place, that dark thinking, that generational thinking. I'm not talking about generational curses, all those things. And we don't want to return to that place of darkness. Will we? Oh yeah, we'll make a mistake, we'll make an error, we'll do something wrong, we'll hurt somebody, they'll hurt us, whatever the deal is. But the fact of the matter is, when we live with intention, we open doors. We begin to, we see more good things come in. And even in the midst of darkness, I am telling you that I can always find something to be grateful for. That gratitude fuels where I am. That even when things don't go my way, the other day I was sitting in the hospital waiting for my brother. It was supposed to be a fairly short procedure and everything, and it ended up being 3 times as long as that whole thing. I'd been up since 3:30 in the morning to get ready to drive up to the hospital and get where I needed to be. Even in the midst of that, I found people to smile at. I found people to talk to. I found things to occupy my mind, so I didn't get caught up in, woe is me, I had to cancel this appointment, I'm not going to be back in time. All those things that, would be easy to get wrapped around in my brain. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't have to live that upsetness. I didn't have to live with ingratitude. In 2 Corinthians 5, it tells us, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." Recently, I've been having a couple of conversations with a few people going through difficult times. God is not making your life miserable. And I'm not talking to those people. I'm talking in general. God is not making our life miserable. Sometimes we do our own things. But once we realize that we've made a mistake, that we've made an error, it's time to back up the train and find the place that God has placed us. And I'm not talking about a church fellowship or this or that. What I'm talking about a place of peace, a place of rest, a place of understanding. When I realize that I am at rest, I can do great and amazing things. I don't have to think about what I'm doing. I can live with intentionality. I can live with intensity. I can move ahead in those areas, and take advantage of the things that are before me. The place that I'm in, the physical, geographical place, isn't what defines me. What defines me is the place I am in Him, and how I move with God, what I do with God, and what I take from Him to help others. So most people, when they go through a dark time, what they're doing is they're seeing themselves from a place that, God has forgotten us. But God has not forsaken you. He's not left you behind. If you're going through a tough time, maybe it's illness, maybe it's sickness, maybe it's the death or the loss that you've experienced in some area, maybe it's the loss of, employment. Trust God that He's never going to leave you and never going to forsake you. Begin to stay in the place of rest. Begin to embrace the goodness of God and what He's doing, and see that you are in that place. We are seated in high places, high above principality, high above powers and rulers of darkness. Good things are coming our way. The best is yet to come. People say, well, how can you say that? Because I believe it. Even in the midst of the rising fear again that's come out of COVID and some of those experiences, the best is yet to come. We are going to see miraculous things. We are going to see people healed. We're going to see people made whole. We're going to see health restored. We're going to see the dead raised. We're going to see great things come. We're going to see miraculous accumulation of finances for the helping of others. Which brings me to a point that I think sometimes gets missed. There's this belief in the kingdom with a lot of people who are in the fellowship of God. I'm not talking about ours, but if this speaks to you, walk with it for a minute. But somehow they believe they have to separate themselves from the people of the world, otherwise they get caught up in the wrongness of it. And I'm just going to say I don't believe that to be true. First of all, if you want to use an Old Testament scripture, it says the heathen are our inheritance. So inheritance means we get good things. But there's also this thing that says that the people of God ought to be, where we're at ought to bring blessing into people's lives. If we're not with them, how do we bring blessing into their lives? So we're going to have to step out and go beyond. So let us begin to see the place we're at as a place with God, a dwelling place, that He inhabits us, and He holds court, if you will, in us. The next thing I want to jump down to is about being honest, about having a personal integrity, if you will. Integrity is like loyalty. You can't tell somebody to be loyal. You can't tell somebody to have integrity. The only person that you have control over is you. I can only control the integrity of my life. I can only carry out the loyalty of my life. I've said to my grandchildren in particular, I talk to Jacob probably the most, that you can be a loyal friend. That doesn't mean that other people are going to be loyal to you. What it means is you have to believe that they're going, that at some point God is going to put people in your life that are going to be loyal to you, and they're going to trust you, and they're going to care about you. And so the temptation is to be someone we're not, to get what we want, to say the things, do the things, to people please, all those things. The fact of the matter is we need to live a life of integrity. We need to be honest with ourselves. Proverbs 11 says that the integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, but if anyone does not provide for relatives, and especially members of his own household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Philippians 4:8, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is holy and lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think upon these things. And finally, Ephesians 5 says, be imitators of God as beloved children. God walks in integrity. He moves in integrity. He moves with loyalty. He's always loyal towards you. He never gives up on you, and He never gives up on me. One of the things that happens is part of the reason people deny their past, want to get as far away from it. And please hear me. I understand change people, places, and things, and I understand the need to not change people, places, and things. But it's easy to get caught up in old habits and things like that. And you and I will get caught up in old habits and old ways of doing business. I talked earlier about that default, about that automatic pilot. You and I will get caught up in that if we don't fill ourselves. If we're not like the cup of coffee, I know this isn't coffee, maybe it will turn into coffee while I'm holding it. But if we get bounced, coffee will come out of the coffee cup. But if we don't if we don't fill ourselves with goodness, if we don't walk in integrity, and someone comes up and challenges us, we'll move in a wrongful spirit. We'll move in the same way we always did. We'll play the same tapes about our life and our existence and about this person and about that person. When in fact, we need to have integrity and believe the best about people. Believe the goodness of God is moving in their life. The worst person I encounter still has the thumbprint of God in their life. They have not discovered it. And that is the uncovering or the unraveling or the discovery of the identity of Christ that dwells within us. The next part is to recognize that this isn't an event, but it's a process. We're on a journey. And so I have to be willing to welcome the discipline or the disciplines that come within those things. My disciplines about living a life of integrity or living with intensity or having intentional living, those things create my reality. Those things create cities. Well-disciplined activity begins to move out in uniqueness, in productivity, and in abundance. Our fellowship is named Abundant Grace Fellowship. The more I talk about grace, the more it abounds. The more it abounds in my own life, the more it moves into other people's lives. Romans 4, verse 15 says, "For the law brings wrath, but where there is no law, there is no transgression." John 8:32 says, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The disciplines of God, the walking with God, those things are how we get to where we want to be. Those are part of our journey. It doesn't mean I might not stumble. It doesn't mean one of us might not fall. It doesn't mean I won't have difficulties or trials or tribulations in my life. But I don't want to be the initiator of those bad things in my life. I want to be the initiator of good things. And so when I was talking about how I start my day, I've had to look at how I start my day. Am I the slave to the notifications on my smartphone, or am I the slave to the goodness of God? And so those are the places that you and I get to move in, to live with intentionality. I want to be known as someone who fought for what was right. One of my core thought processes is that I would be able to lift up the oppressed without destroying the oppressor. That I would be able to do the things that would bring blessing into my family, bring blessing into my friends and our church fellowship, continuing to walk in the things that provide goodness in my life and move me from that place where I don't believe in what God's saying or what God's doing, but giving me the opportunity to manifest His goodness and carry me away in that river, that river of goodness, that river of God. So Galatians 5:1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourself be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." Psalm 18:25 says, "To be faithful, you show yourself faithful. To those with integrity, you show integrity. To the pure, you show yourself pure. But to the crooked, you show yourself shrewd. You rescue the humble, but you humiliate the proud. You light a lamp for me, the Lord my God, light up my darkness. In your strength, I can crush an army. With my God, I can scale any wall." Now, a lot of people believe that's talking about people. It's talking about the works of the enemy. It's talking about the work of Satan, if you will, about demonic interlude. It's talking about the crushing out of those things. When I told you the scripture earlier that we live far above principality, far above power and rulers of the air, what I'm saying to you is we have authority over all those things. Those things have no place in our life. They have no factor in our life. So where does that leave us? That leaves us in a good place. That leaves us with the opportunity to move ahead. The more that I take those disciplines and I embrace those disciplines, when I'm pushed, when I'm shoved by the tides of life, when things don't go my way or things move against me, my response isn't criticism and sarcasm and all those things. My response is to remain in that place of God and recognize that first and foremost, people are not my enemy. We battle not. The book of Ephesians chapter 6 tells us, I battle not against flesh and blood, but against principality, power, and ruler of darkness. How do I do that? I move in an opposite spirit. It's not about that works. But sometimes it's just about staying in that place of rest, about not being excited and overcome with emotion, about not letting the work of the enemy rock my boat. It's about taking advantage of the things that the Lord has put in my hands and walking in those things so I might have a life that I can give that life. So when you bump into me in wrongness, or someone comes along that might want to hurt me or change where I'm at, or even that notification that would come in on Facebook telling me some crazy thing, my response is, God, you are bigger than this circumstance. God, I impeach you today to move in sister so-and-so's life or brother so-and-so's life, and to see their lives change, to come against the spirit of divorce and separation, to come against those things that create cancer in people's bodies, to come against sickness and illness and ailment and disease, to believe that the dead can be raised up. There's enough scriptures to justify all those things, but those things need to be in you. Many, many years ago, there was a spaghetti sauce, and basically the gist of it, it's everything's in there. The tomatoes are in there, the spices are in, all these things. Everything of God dwells within you. It's not external, though God lives about you and through you. He lives in you. He lives in you. And because he lives in you, the other day somebody made a post about not feeling creative. And, I said, the Creator dwells within you. Because the Creator dwells within you, as you begin to tap into the Creator, you become more creative. If you struggle with being a giver, as you tap into the giving power of God, you will find it easier and easier to give to others, to do those things that open additional doors in your life, to see, as the scriptures tell us, even in the Old Testament, that the windows of heaven would be open and there would be a pouring out in lives. I said to my wife the other day, I have this friend, and he's not a believer, but he challenges me about how small I think sometimes, and he's not critical about my thinking. He says things to me that just go, wow, I'm thinking here and he's thinking here, and he's not a pie in the sky kind of guy. He's a reality guy. If anything, sometimes he's probably too real and too blunt and too this and too that. But I appreciate him because he's caused me to see that, over the years, maybe I've allowed circumstances and situations to take me down. Some of you who have known me for any length of time know that in 2008, this month, our house was overcome with flooding. And, here we go, 13 years ago. And, if there was a part of me that didn't think it affected me, this mindset reset made me realize, with all this rain that we've been getting, and people were putting up pictures of rivers flooding and houses and basements, and I was really, 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 really struggling with some of that. I was struggling because clearly I haven't been fully healed from the pain of my own time. The end game on our house was, it was overcome by black mold. No amount of praying, no amount of friends, all the things. I did everything I knew how to do, and it didn't work. And, after 5 years, my wife looked at me and said, we're all done. We are done. How I ended up in Keene was the result of being all done. I watched everything that I thought was going to be my future disappear. So I was struggling with the idea that, the home that we had, the dreams we had, all those things were gone. Well, I tell you that because there was a part of me that was going through the pain again of remembering what it was like to walk down every day and see 6 inches of water in my lower level, to go down and smell the mold, and to just be taking truckloads of, huge dumpster, We had to clear out everything. Being concerned about this $50,000 piece of equipment that sat in my basement, which was income producing, thinking about what I could do, how I could utilize the water. I looked at even thinking about opening up a bottling company at one time, looked into the machines that make bottled water. I did all those things and just nothing seemed to come together. And as I watched our savings account, retirement funds go away, and as I watched increased destruction on our home, and as I watched it just tear me up physically, emotionally, and mentally, finally it came to that day and it was all done. And while I was done living there, I wasn't done paying for it. Financially, we were indebted to that property. It took another 3 or 4 years before that debt, or before continued payment went away. But by that time, we ended up living in an apartment over a smoker, and there's just so many crazy things that happened. And I realized that when this friend of mine came into my life and started talking about these things, I was like, can I really believe? Can I really believe that big? Can I believe that large? Can I believe that I still have game in my life? Can I believe the things that I speak over my life? Do I believe that when I take the scripture and it says, I raise my eyes. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. Am I still a believer in that? Do I believe in all the things that I've studied and had to walk in all those years? All those years. And and I can tell you that I'm in a much better place today than I was even a month ago. This mindset reset thing, it's messed with me a little bit. I didn't realize I still had some old tapes that I had to take out and replace with other things. Like, what if it goes bad? Well, I had to begin to counter that and flip the story. What if it goes right? What if that person, people would come to me and they go, what are you going to do if they die? And I'd be like, what are you going to do if they don't die? You know? And so I've had to look at these things. You know, it's a process because I'm still in process. I'm still on a journey. And as I've shared thousands of times probably, I think sometimes our journey is a lot like the walk of the Hebrews children. And they left Pharaoh's land and they came down to the edge of the water, and Moses drops the staff in the water and the wind begins to come from the other side and it opens up the Red Sea and does all this stuff. But the people that were at the back, all they could hear was the thundering of hoofs and the chariots coming through the desert to kill them. And the ones that were in front, they were faced at the beginning. They're thinking, I want to go back before the Red Sea opened up. And what about all the ones? Some of them are playing with their kids, or trying to get their kids under control and try not to be stressed out for the sake of their children. We're talking about approximately 1.5 million people making this trek. It's not like going downtown Keene or something. I remember how packed it was when there was 50,000 people here for the Pumpkin Festival years ago. And we're talking, we're talking 30 times that many people, all, getting ready to walk through an ocean, and they're looking up, and, you can imagine there's probably all these fish that are up in the walls of water, and they're looking out, looking at all these people. And, can you imagine the little kids going by and seeing fish floating by and wanting to stick their hands in the water, and all those things that go along, and seeing perhaps dead fish on the floor of the ocean. It's still wet and it's still soggy, and there's seaweed and there's all, whatever there is. And these people were walking through, and there had to be a part of them that goes, well, I don't know. I don't know if I trust this water. And at the same time, you got people in the back that are hearing the thundering of hoofs, and they're hearing the wheels cranking through the sand, and hearing the shouts and the screams, and these people are coming down, and people get all through. And now they're across the ocean. They're still looking back, and here comes Pharaoh's army. And all of a sudden, the water just caves in. And then they get on the other side, and it says Miriam danced. And I always struggle with that because I thought if she was a person of faith, she would have danced on the side before the water rise. And then they still don't get it. Moses hits the rock a second time. They find water the second time he hits it out of anger. Be angry and sin not, the scriptures tell us. So what are we left with? We're left with this understanding. It says that they went to 42 different encampments. It said they never really went more than 10 miles. 1.5 million people are walking around this desert, and they're super close. They're within miles, few short miles of where they want to be, the promised land. But no, we read through it and we're there. There's things, there was things. There was a generation that wasn't promised, was no longer promised to go into the promised land. And then even when people went into the promised land, you had people that came back and they're all caught up with the spies. They're believing the press. They're reading CNN. They're reading Fox News. They're reading, Huffington Post and OANN, and they're reading all this and they're believing all these things. And there's only two, Caleb and Joshua, who said, you know what? That's where we belong. And so I've had to come to the conclusion that despite all the things that happen, this is where I belong. I'm planted here to bloom here. That I am the garden of God. I read about the Garden of Eden, and I used to be really excited about that. But now I'm really excited when I see Paul say, you are the garden. And that in this garden, things grow. That as I plant good things in me, they grow, they take life, they bring life. I live with intentionality. I live with intensity. I fight against the things that would try to keep me from, whatever my destiny is. I don't even care what my destiny is. You got to hear me. I'm not worried about my destiny. I'm worried about my journey. I want to make sure that when you bump into me, what's in my coffee is coffee. When you bump into me, I want to make sure that what comes out is Jesus, undefiled. Bible tells us, tells us in the scriptures that by the word of their testimony and the blood of the Lamb, they live their lives above reproach. Above reproach, above those places of mistakes and sins. Will people make mistakes? Yes, we all do. What we do with those mistakes, is it a learning process or is it a death sentence? We have to determine what those things look like. So when we're bumped into, our life is different. And that brings me to this place. You and I can live with intensity. We need to believe what the scriptures say. We need to believe that there's a better life in us than even the one I live now. That I'm surrounded by people. My wife will tell you there's been people in my life who have not been loyal to me. They have done terrible and hurtful and harmful things. There are people that have, stolen I believe this guy because I believe the best. I got caught up with this guy, and jet setting, limos were going in and limos were going out, and all these things were happening. And the next thing you know, he makes off with $8,000 worth of our ministry money and disappears. Well, until the FBI caught him. Because he didn't only do that to me, he did that to others. And then there was someone else who did something very, very similar. I've had the betrayal, but the betrayals have not made me bitter. The betrayals have caused me to believe more in the person of God and who he has made me to be. Does it mean I look for people to betray me? Nope. But it was only a few months ago that somebody did something really harsh and hard to me, left me wanting to be angry, left me wanting to cry, left me wanting to lash out, left me wanting to do something. I finally said, you know what, God? Your child. You deal with your child. I'll deal with me. Because that's the only place we come to. Because that person that hurt me is still in the body of Christ. And so on the night that Jesus was betrayed, we're going to take communion today. Because I need to be reminded that even as I take this, the people that have hurt me are still the body of Christ. Whether they're doing time behind prison bars, or they just don't connect. Many, many years ago, probably, I don't know, guess it must be 8, 9, 10 years ago, a friend of mine did something really horrible. I watched the destruction of a whole family unit. I watched him go away to jail. Just the other day, I was looking to see when he gets out of jail. 2026. And since that time, he's been moved to a prison in our region. And, I've had to think long and hard, what's my connection going to be? Am I going to be there loving? Am I going to be there helpful? Am I going to remind him of who he is despite all the things he did? I hope so, because it's on my radar screen to live with intentionality. The people that have hurt me, I have gone out of my way to make those connections when and wherever I can. So today, as I take communion, I'm reminded of the people that have hurt me. I'm reminded of the people that love me. I'm reminded of the people that are loyal to me. So on the night Jesus was betrayed, he said, "This is my body." And he distributed it to his disciples. This body contains healing and wholeness. It contains the life of Christ dwelling in it. So today, as I take this bread, I'm reminded that you and I are linked by the power of the blood of the Lamb, by the blood of the Lamb, by the testimony that we are God's children, that we would live our lives above reproach. And in like fashion, Jesus took the cup and he said, "This is my blood. This signifies a new covenant, one of grace. It is because of grace I am here. It is because of grace I will continue to be here. It is because of grace I will love and never stop loving people, regardless of their circumstance or their situation." And that's just how I've determined to live my life. I have, like Nathan Hale. If you're not a history buff, but Nathan Hale said, "I only regret that I have but one life to give for my country." Well, here's my deal. My deal is I have no regrets about the life I live in Christ, because it is the life that I live in abundance. And because of the abundance of life in me, I get to bring abundance into other people's lives. Today, we have a choice. Will we live with intentionality? Will we live with intensity? Or will we just be like that fish that, as Jacob would say, floats downstream? Or will we be like the salmon that comes to the head of the mouth of the river and says, "I have a destination. I have something to live for. I have something to move for. I have something to change in people's lives. I will bring that reproductive life into the lives of others." That very seed, in a seed, you look at a seed and you go, "It's just a seed." In that seed is life. And that's how we can live our life. The Bible told us about Jesus said, "Unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it won't bring life. But when it does, it will first bring forth a blade, and then it will bring a stalk, and then it will grow." There are things that are growing out of our life because we are allowing ourselves to be bloom where we were planted. Today is your day. Don't let anyone steal it away from you. God bless you. We'll be back next week. I honestly don't know what we're going to be talking about next week. If you live in the Keene area, we have a home group coming up this coming Wednesday night at 6:30. If you need to know more about that, reach out to me. If you have questions about this message, or you need prayer for something, or you need someone to be able to talk to you about something, we love you and we care about you and we're available to you. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day. In New England, it's not raining today. Hopefully that will last for more than an hour. And even if it doesn't, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. God bless you. And be that cup of coffee that only brings forth coffee. Be that vessel that when you're bumped, you bring forth Jesus.